When I was studying Spanish in 2022, the summer of 2022, there was just one sort of realization that I had that like completely changed my mindset when it comes to learning languages. It was like this mental shift of how to learn languages, specifically Spanish. And once I understood it, it's almost like things clicked. And I knew exactly what to do to get fluent. And so fast forward a few months, and I was conversationally fluent in Spanish. I was able to have an hour-long conversation with a native Spanish speaker on like this app called Hello Talk. We had a new Spanish teacher. I started speaking Spanish with her. When I told people that I'd been studying for a few months, every single time people were like, wow, that's really impressive. Me and my class, we traveled to Spain, and I had like an exchange student whose mom even told me, she told me that I was super smart because I learned Spanish this quickly. When I came back from school, all of my classmates had almost like been like wondering, oh wait, how do you learn Spanish this quickly? What did you do? Like, because to them it was like before the summer I was like completely not fluent, and after summer it's like I spoke Spanish, right? But it wasn't always like this at all. Actually, my parents are come from Azerbaijan, and that's a country that is like, it's Asian sort of. It's like in between Europe and Asia, and sort of Middle Eastern as well. It's like Turkish almost. And my dad moved here to Sweden, and so I grew up in Sweden. I went to an English preschool, and I also grew up speaking English with my siblings and my cousins. And we also grew up watching like English speaking shows, so Buzz Lightyear and like Minecraft YouTubers and all that. So we grew up speaking English. I would say English is my strongest language, and obviously I went to a Swedish school, so obviously Swedish is also kind of like my native language, sort of. So kind of I have 3 different native languages, sort of, that are like I essentially knew for free, sort of, because I was born sort of speaking them growing up. But the sort of agenda that I had growing up, which everyone had growing up, was that when you learn a language, you learn it by, okay, you need to know the numbers, so let's memorize all the numbers. Then we need to know the alphabet, so let's memorize the alphabet and let's find the way to sing it, A, B, C. You know how when we were learning our language, we like had the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, like you'd try to find those to other languages. You'd use apps like Duolingo, which, you know, marketed themselves as the best language learning app ever. I remember I tried learning Arabic at one point because I started becoming religious, and I went on Duolingo and I tried like their Arabic course, and I gave up in like the first day or like the second day because I started writing down the alphabet and it was so complicated. And as I was doing Duolingo, it's like I barely learned anything of Duolingo. I started memorizing like the alphabet and the letters and like the basic way of learning that you and me knew since we were kids. I remember at one point my dad wanted me to improve my Azeri, so he got me like this Azeri book where I would study Azeri, and it was like in English, and it would like help you learn Azeri. And like he told me like, if you do this, I'll give you like extra money for your Monads paying. Like Monads paying is like your monthly allowance, right? And so I went through it. At the end of each chapter there was like this vocabulary test, and so I put that vocabulary into like a notebook. Oh my god, I still have the notebook, I think. Hold on, wait like 2 seconds. This is actually insane. Okay, so I couldn't actually find it, but anyway, like I would write down every single one of these words and essentially study them like flashcards. And guess what? Didn't really remember any of it. I learned more from just speaking the language of my grandparents and my parents than I did, you know, studying it like that. And even in school, that's what we did. We would memorize, we'd go on like Quizlet and stuff. We'd go through the words and memorize them. But again, that never really worked, and that probably hasn't worked for you either. And it was until I saw these 2 videos that it really like changed how I saw learning languages. First, I saw this video of this guy recommended an app called Language Transfer. And so naturally I was like, okay, I tried it. And in Language Transfer, I was like mind blown. I did the first like 5-10 lessons. And at this point, like learning languages was like a trend in my class because this guy had made it. And obviously I want to be the best and stuff. And so when I discovered this app, I told all my friends because I was so mind blown on the way the method was essentially. And essentially, it wasn't anything too special, but it was so much different. It didn't have any sort of memorization. It didn't tell you that to memorize every verb and every irregular conjugation pattern. No. Language Transfer is like this like course thing. Instead of telling you what things are, he explained the concepts behind them. And this was a big mental shift to me. And I remember one day I was doing my language transfer lesson. So about 3 months before the summer of 2022, when I actually started studying Spanish and actually got fluent by the end of it. In that time period, I remember one day I was going to the train station to go to school, right? But my mind sort of wandered off, and I just sort of thought about how fluency even comes to be. How does one get fluent? And my definition of fluency was just to have conversations. And to me, it just broke it down to, well, grammar plus like vocabulary is just how to make sentences, and sentences is literally just that. Sentences is the language, like when it's spoken and understood. And so I just thought about this like simple sort of equation, which I now call the fluency equation. And it was just simply as this: if I want to get fluent in Spanish, Fluency is just a conversational fluency. And a conversation is where you speak Spanish. And Spanish is just Spanish grammar with Spanish vocabulary, because that's what a sentence is, right? So fluency is just speaking Spanish and understanding Spanish. And once I thought of that, I was like, okay, wait, so speaking Spanish times understanding Spanish is fluency. And I just thought about it, wait, a conversation is literally just that. A conversation is you and me, I speak, you understand, then you speak and I understand. So you have to be able to speak Spanish and understand Spanish. And all of that Spanish has to be native, like spoken, real Spanish. And so once I understood this, it just made so much sense, because I looked back how we learned our own native language. And we weren't on Anki, we weren't on Quizlet memorizing words on Duolingo and stuff. We were actively having conversations in our native language. And our goal was to speak it and understand it and imitate it like our parents, aka speak it at a native level. And so based on this, it completely shifted the way I saw like language learning, because it just made more sense to study using real Spanish instead of studying like Anki decks and stuff. What I really use as proof here was that when we're kids and when we were learning this, we never memorized, but we rather internalized, right? Because as kids, we would always ask why? And once we understood the why, then we saw a pattern with every other word. And once we did that, not only did we know one thing, we learned several things. And for me, this was just a simple concept of cognates, which is what language transfer introduced in the first 10 lessons. Where English and Spanish both have roots in Latin. Spanish is a Latin language and English is a Germanic language, but it has so many Latin roots that English is also kind of like a Latin language. And from this Latin sort of connection, in English, you have the word presentation, words that end with ation. Any word that ends with ation, pretty much in Spanish, you take off the ation and put acion, and you get the Spanish version. Granted, they pronounce it per vowels in Spanish pronunciation. So, presentation in Spanish is presentación. Now, that concept that I understood there, because I understood that concept, now I know about 300 Spanish words or something like that. And in total, the list of cognates is about 3,000 something Spanish words. So even though I don't know these 3,000 Spanish words, I actually do, because all I need to know is a few set of rules. And based on these rules, I can make thousands of variations of those rules. And so after doing language transfer and understanding the different concepts, I created a strategy of studying native Spanish content during the summer of 2022, because my goal was to get fluent by the end of it, and I knew it was possible because I saw other YouTubers do the same thing, and when they studied, they also studied by studying native Spanish content, and they were all using the same equation of fluency. And so I created 2 exercises to get these down, and they were based on these 2 methods. First video I saw was this guy, essentially he studied native Spanish content. He would study the videos of native Spanish speakers speaking, and he would try understanding it to his best of ability. And so the process of that, I just simplified to LUR. Listen, understand, repeat. LUR. Very simple, right? And so now I call that the LUR ladder. And so that's how I got the one part of the equation, the understanding part of the equation, right? Because the fluency equation was speaking and understanding real native Spanish content. So we got the understand part. Then for the speaking part, I saw another YouTuber named Shauma. He got fluent in like 30 days, and all he was doing was speaking with natives. He did like a challenge where he spoke only Spanish for 1 day, and his goal was just to speak and then try to like know what he's saying, to understand what to say. And so I simplified that to a SIR. Speak, understand, repeat. SIR ladder. And so based on these 2 videos, I created my 2 exercises. One of them for the LUR ladder, I called it transcript training. For the SIR ladder, essentially speak, understand. For the speaking part of the equation, I call it narrate, elaborate, contemplate. A simple speaking exercise that I just made. And so I hyperfixated on these 2 exercises in the last like 4 or 5 weeks of the summer of 2022. And I also tried speaking with natives as much as I could on this app called Hello Talk. And by the end of it, I remember around August 17th or so, a few days before school would start on August 23rd, I went on like a live chat on Hello Talk, and I just started speaking. Before I knew it, it had been an hour, and I'd just been speaking with this like native Spanish speaker, and we just been having a regular conversation. And by the end of it, when we said our goodbyes, I was just sitting in my room like, oh my God, I just had like a conversation in Spanish, like me, like I'm not, I'm Turkish, like I'm Azeri. I just had a conversation with native Spanish speaker. And this continued on that when I came back from like the summer break, we had a new Spanish teacher. I was just speaking Spanish with her, and she was also super impressed with my like pronunciation. All my classmates were like almost confused. And so this framework, the fluency equation, the reason why I believe that it worked so well for me and implementing it is really like the fact of the universe is that the only language that you and me know that we've learned fluently is our own language, our own native language. And your own native language follows the fluency equation. Anyone who ever gets fluent, I just noticed that, wait, any native speaker of Spanish, anyone who ever did get fluent in Spanish, including myself now, they always just spoke real Spanish. They always heard native Spanish, like through native Spanish content, or it was native Spanish conversations, right? And they also spoke with a native Spanish level. And they did that by imitating the native Spanish speakers. And when we were kids, think about it, what do kids do? Kids imitate their parents, which is why when you're a kid, you probably imitate the accent of your parents, which is why you probably sound like them, right? And so as kids, like I remember, like if you have any like younger siblings or anything, you probably notice your younger siblings will probably just imitate you because you're older. When I started, like, I'm Muslim, right? I pray. My step siblings, they're like 2 years old, 3 years old. When they see me praying, they also like do the prayer movement just like how I do. Like my stepsister, she's like 2 years old. She saw my stepmom doing makeup, and she went to her like makeup area and started doing it on herself as well. Because kids imitate their parents. So of course kids imitate the speech of their parents, and their parents are speaking at a native level. Think about it. Your parents aren't slowing down when they speak to you. They don't go, "Hola, me llamo Hamid, me gusta hablar," and no, they speak at their native level, and all you do as a kid is listen to that and imitate it and speak it. And you understand your real native language. And the fluency equation is speak real native language times understand real native language. And that equals fluency. And so that's what my method of climbing the Fluency ladders entails, essentially. I'm not going to explain this method, I've gone through it many times, but essentially it follows the fluency equation. And so now, when I look at how to learn other languages, I see it through a completely different perspective, because now it's like you know what goes into someone knowing a language fluently. Because when you're in the beginning, you think that, oh, getting fluent, okay, so you memorize all the language and now you know it. It's like, no, that's not how it works, because you never memorize your own native language, right? So how do you know what a roller coaster is? How do you know what a banana is if you've never done it on your memorization thing? You know, recently, this was pretty recently, we were doing like this game in our Spanish class, and we were playing this game, it's called Pictionary, where essentially the teacher was supposed to like write something on the board and you're supposed to say what it is in Spanish or something like that. Or like the teacher was gonna put like a picture of something and you're supposed to write what it is in Spanish. And so we were all in different groups, and there was a certain group of people in my class, which like no hate to them, right? They were like, they were like the average Duolingo users. Like in school, the teacher would give us like this Quizlet where you'd memorize every word. And so they memorized this list of, massive vocabulary list of words, okay? And so when they were doing this exercise, they were the best. Like you'd think that because I speak fluently, I would be the best at the exercise. But no, we're going through weird like vacation vocabulary. And so my classmates who had been studying and memorizing the different words, they knew it, of course, and they won the entire thing. And I said something kind of like as a joke, but it was still true, that in class they were viewed as like the best, right? And in the sense that they knew Spanish very well. But they couldn't make a single sentence in Spanish at all. They don't know any Spanish at all, but they memorized the vocabulary list. And so my point was that though they knew the words, they don't know Spanish. And though I didn't know the words, I know Spanish. And isn't that interesting? Because think about it, like, how are you fluent in English, for example, but you can get an F in English, like the class English? Like, think about that. You and me, you're watching this video, right? You're a fluent, you literally are a native English speaker, probably, right? Sort of. Let's say you are, right? But like, how is it still possible that you don't have an A in like the class English, right? Like, isn't that like a weird thing to think about? It's because the real like language, the part of the language that people care about, the part that like people look at you and say, wow, you're fluent in the language, is not about the vocabulary or the complicated words that you know how to say. It's just about being able to speak it and understand it. And so every single time you see someone that's fluent, and like, I'm not saying like you know a few words here and there, I'm talking about like you speak the language. When you can do that in the language, when you're fluent, it's always from understanding the native speech and speaking in a native speech. That goes for literally every language that has ever been like used. When I see people doing anything other than, you know, doing this method of climbing the Fluency ladders, essentially following this equation, following the fluency equation, it's just ineffective, and it just shows that you're wasting your time. And that's why I really want to spread this message of how to study languages and how to actually get fluent the right way. To further expand upon this fluency equation, what it means is Spanish is just sentences, and sentences is just grammar and vocabulary. Like, if we want to dumb it down, that's what a sentence is. Grammar plus vocabulary, and all of that is at a native level. So Spanish isn't hola hablo español. Spanish is hola hablo español. Right? Spanish isn't hablas bastante bien, it's hablas bastante bien, or escúchame, Not escúchame, escúchame. That's real Spanish. So if you're wondering also, that's why these Anki decks and these memorization and the regular method doesn't work, because like we were studying in school, right? There's a quick story. I'm gonna end off the video soon. There's this quick story that like my Swedish teacher told me, and this was like before I ever even thought of learning Spanish. This is like 3 years ago, before I ever started learning Spanish, before I ever did anything language related, really. My Swedish teacher, he was very into French, sort of, but he didn't speak it fluently, but he knew some words here and there. He was like sort of educated on the history of French. He was a history teacher as well. And he told a story. He usually in his lesson, he'd always tell a story of like some sort of fun story. He'd always waste half an hour of the first like lesson. He was a really good teacher, actually. He was like super like goofy as well. He would just talk about French and stuff. Anyways, he was really fun though. He talked about how there was this French student who had been studying French for 8 years in school. Think about that. 8 years in school. Consistently, for 8 years, he'd been studying French in school. And so his mom told him, okay, you know what? You speak French very well. Let's go to France. Let's go to Paris. They went to Paris, and this French student, okay, who had been studying French for 8 years in school, when he came to Paris, he looked around and he told his mom, Mom, I do not know a single thing here. I don't understand anything. What a shame, right? You studied for 8 years. I studied for 3 months, and somehow you don't know anything. And I'm like I'm not saying my Spanish is incredible, but when I went to Spain, I was able to talk to everyone. I was able to speak Spanish with their family. I was able to have conversations with their family, like a native family. Sure, they were speaking slower and stuff, but how is it that someone that studied for 8 years in school and someone who just understood the fluency equation and used it to his advantage, how is it that there is that big of a discrepancy between them? It's because one of them is genuine trash. Like the method is trash, and the other one is just fact. It's just truth. It boggles my mind when people waste their time using Duolingo, using like the Anki deck, because it's just like, bro, did you learn your native language like that? It's just, I don't know, maybe it grinds my gears for no reason. If you're interested in getting fluent using the fluency equation, the way I got fluent, you can add me on Discord. It's the top link in the description, and I can coach you for free. And I literally have only 1 spot left for free coaching. So if you're interested in free coaching or coaching for me in general, then you can add me on Discord and we can talk there. I did also shut down my Spanish school because I'm working on creating all the courses. If you do add me on Discord, then I can send you all the course videos and you can watch them. And if you're interested in learning Spanish as well and getting coaching from me, you also get all the course videos and I'll send them to you through Discord. So if you're interested in learning Spanish through this method of climbing the learn ladders using the fluency equation by studying real Spanish, then add me on Discord and I'll talk to you from there. I hope this video helped you, bro, and stay humble.